Everybody, it's Annette from the Art of Intuition, and today we are going to talk about the butterfly effect in our human experience and how that works. And when we talk about rewriting history, when we talk about shifting frequencies, what is actually happening? Because the butterfly effect gets a lot of chatter as far as large realities, shared realities go. You see it in a lot of books. You see a lot of people talking about it. If you change one thing, then and nothing else is gonna make sense along the way. Everything else is gonna get spiraled out of control. And that's basically what starts to happen in our own little micro universe, our realities, which we create them all. So if we create them all, we have to understand how we actually build them, right? In our human consciousness, we don't know how we built them. We don't have any accountability for them. We don't think we're responsible for them. We just are completely along for the ride, we think. And in a way, our human consciousness is, because it doesn't have the capacity to understand what it's doing. It thinks it's in control, but it's kind of like if anyone ever took driver's ed and they took it and the guy teaching you, or a girl teaching you, I guess it doesn't matter, but the person teaching you had a brake pedal beside you, so they could always slam on the brakes if something happened. That's kind of what it is. Our human consciousness drives, but our soul, different soul aspects, it has the way to slam on the brakes if shit gets really out of control and you're completely off path. That's why you get collapses, okay? That's why things start to go awry. Because all of a sudden, all the stuff we thought we had under control, we don't have under control anymore. So our universe kind of puts the kibosh on it, right? So what happens? What exactly is the butterfly effect? And I watched this mini-series that was on Netflix. I think it's a Stephen King book. It's 11/22/63 or 11/23/63. I can't remember. Can't remember now. It's been so many eons ago that I actually learned history, but and it was basically talking about a guy who went back to time travel to try to stop the Kennedy assassination and everything he did. And when he came back from time traveling, because he did stop it, what had happened? And it wasn't what he thought. Everything had kind of gone a different way because there was an importance of that event happening, so everything else could fall into place. Because our human thinks we kind of know better. Our human consciousness thinks we know the way we want it to happen. We want it to go this way. We want it to go this way. This makes logical sense that if this doesn't happen, even if we go trauma and catastrophe, if this trauma and catastrophe does not happen, then everything else is going to be perfect along the way. Everything is going to be smoother sailing. But sometimes that's not, well, most of the time, that's not how it's going to work. You kind of need those moments, because those moments pivot you into something else. Those, even if you call them a martyr moment, or someone else kind of, or you kind of, you fall on the sword, or someone else falls on the sword for a reality, because it has to kind of go down that way. It has to be that way, because if not, everything else can't fall into place. Your frequency can't increase. You can't get to the next step. They can't get to the next step. And yes, when you see a lot of this stuff playing out all around the world, a lot of people falling on the sword, and a lot of people taking the sword and, metaphorically, hitting somebody else with it. Whether they're clearing karma or taking on karma, they're trying to push realities forward and push the collectives forward. Same thing happens in your world. So as soon as something like that happens, it's going to push you forward. It's that old adage, you push me up and I'll pull you up later. Now, you might not be pulling that exact person up, and you might be going on and doing your journey and then pulling up other people along the way that had nothing to do technically with you, with your initial traumatic experience that got you going on your journey. Because 9 times out of 10, what gets us going is a traumatic events. Most of us start our ascension process because something we're about to, either, like, it's one or two ways. Either you're about to get everything you ever wanted and it all collapses around you, which was the one I did, or it is you have everything but you're still not happy. So everything starts to spiral out of control anyway, because you keep looking for that next thing, and you keep looking for that thing that's going to make it all better, when none of that stuff does make it better. None of that stuff is aligned with your soul. You see all these things that people want, and they're all these human wants. They have nothing to do with your soul. Your soul does not need 6 cars. I guarantee you it does not. It does not. It doesn't need these things. These are not things it needs. It does not need this kind of stuff to achieve anything. It just doesn't need all this. So what's going to happen is something's going to trigger you forward, right? And then when you hit a different frequency, everything that had happened technically didn't happen, because in this frequency it didn't quite go down that way. That's why you can't really remember. You know, just like if you watch any time travel story, you know, people don't remember that stuff because it didn't happen that way in this universe. That's not how that went down. It didn't go down that way because in this frequency it couldn't go down that way, and that's why we forget things. And now we're in a different frequency where everything that was going to happen in that in that old frequency is not going to exactly play out that way, because you're not going to make the same choices. Your choices are going to be different because your frequency is different. So by you making a different choice, all of a sudden now you're going to have a different reality. So in that butterfly effect is essentially now you in a different frequency, now you're making different choices. And that is why we talk so much about shifting the realities and shifting, in a way, the past shifts. And nothing is kind of how it is. You see a lot of people who can get really bogged down on any identities, right? And our human consciousness does it all the time. It doesn't matter what it was that defines you, you don't want to let go of it. Our human consciousness does not want to let go of it because it feels like it has an identity from it. It's either made money from it, it's gotten attention from it, or it gives it some kind of grounding, which I don't really like that word, but it anchors them in some way. You know, it takes them because they know I'm important because I survived. Survivor's a big one too. You see it everywhere. It's everyone's tagline, you know, I'm a survivor. I survived, I survived, I survived. We have to get past all that stuff. We have to drop all that stuff, because if we don't drop all that stuff, we stay connected to all of these old realities. We stay connected to being defined by them. We don't get to move on. You know, we don't get to that next level. We don't get to go to the next part of the game, in a sense, because we're too bogged down by the old game and who we were in the old game. You know, that's why so many of us, we shift what we do all the time, because we can't just do one thing, because we're going to shift out of that one thing. You know, all of us at some point channeled. If you haven't channeled, you should start channeling, because it is a way to really open up your mind and open up your consciousness, and you're just channeling higher aspects of yourself. You can't channel anything else. That's all you're channeling, so there's no fear there. If there is fear, work through the fear of doing it. It opens us up, but we can't stay there, because channeling is a separated state. Spirit guides is a separated state. Anything, religion is a separated state. All that stuff outside of you is a separated state. And as long as we stay in those separated states, we are not empowered to go forward, owning what we have done, seeing what has pushed us forward, and continuing to make different choices to then reshape something else. If we keep staying in the same frequency and doing the same shit, we're going to keep creating the same thing. That's what our human did. That's what humans do. Anyone in a human consciousness, that's what we do. That's what we had done all those years. That's what we try to get away from. You know, trying to get through awakening and ascension and doing the same thing doesn't make a lot of sense, because you can't do it that way. You know, you can't just take ascension and, you know, there'll be a time when you're going to be meditating and you're going to be connecting to something else. You're going to be expanded. And you're going to see, and that's when you really get into that whole love and light phase, and that beautiful phase which that is. But eventually you have to get past that, and you will get past that, because you have to take all that and rearrange your life and align it to that frequency. That's the butterfly effect. You know, that's the first butterfly effect. And then you just keep going farther and farther, because you're going to make different choices, because you're a different person. You are not defined by the choices you already made, because in the new frequency, technically, you didn't make them. Technically, it didn't happen. Technically, the story's different. No, you know, if we even play for a bit, no, that's not what happened in that relationship. It just wasn't aligned, and that's the end of it. Any other thing we put to it besides it's not aligned, it's a story we're telling ourselves to keep kind of doubling down, digging our heels in on, I was the victim in the story. Or I was the fucking hero in the story. It doesn't matter how we even proclaim ourselves. We're the antagonist or the protagonist. We were terrible. We were the best. You know, we saved 1,000 people. We were responsible for something even more catastrophic to our human. It doesn't even matter. All of it is choices that we made in a different frequency. It doesn't exist anymore. I was in a different frequency when I started this video. Doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's who we are now. And we have to continue to go forward. We cannot entrench ourselves in old beliefs. We cannot continue to entrench ourselves in what people were before. You know, and we have to be able to accept it. If we're shifting, other people can shift too. I see so many people say, "Oh, that's the way it is. It's always going to be the way. That's how that person is." And it might be. That person might be predominantly in one aspect, and that's the only aspect you see. And when the shit hits the fan, that's the one they're going to go back to. And yeah, they can maybe put on a face for a little while, but in the end, they haven't really transcended past that. That's very likely could be true. But we have to expect different. Because if we never expect different, we never get different. And we have to be open to the fact they might be the same, but they might not be. And I got to be open to something new. I have to expect something new. And if we see the old thing, we can close out the reality again and go on. But we're what's going to change everything. It's not looking at someone else and waiting for them to do it, waiting for them to do that thing, whatever that thing is. You know I've been dealing with the situation for a couple months now. I get so mad about it last night. So much anger come up. I was messing around with the tarot cards that I had done, and I pulled out the one that said you're angry with yourself. And of course I wasn't. I knew it even before I pulled it. Of course I'm angry with myself, because this thing has been out of alignment for the past 6 months to a year, and I didn't get tough enough with the situation to align it. I kind of let it go, which we will do that for a while. And sometimes we kind of want to support, but when we keep getting taken advantage of, we get to this point where we're like, I'm not doing this anymore. Screw this. I'm done with it. I'm closing the whole thing out. I don't want to talk about it anymore. You know, we kind of get to that point that it's done. And if you don't come from, we talk a lot about our astrological signs. I've done a lot of videos on that. If they're not on Substack, they're going to be on YouTube. Some older ones where we talk about our sign kind of going out and getting cleansed. So I'm a Taurus. My sun sign's a Taurus. And one of the traits of a Taurus is, it takes us a while to kind of make a choice. Once we make that choice, we don't go back on that choice. We're done, we close it out, and we move on, and that's it. You push us far enough, and, we close the whole thing out. We're not the play around kind of sign. That's not what we are. Now, there are shadow sides to that in our human, the stubbornness, the kind of entrenching in. But when you get into your ascension process, you drop the shadowy parts of your sign. You understand that a lot of these traits kind of push you through. And you were born under that sign for a reason. Just like everything you did in your human life, in some capacity, comes back in your ascended realities. That knowledge will be necessary in some way or the other. You're going to need to know how to do those things. It was not a waste of time, but it wasn't what you were here for. It was more of a training ground for these realities, for these next things. This is what's important. This is what matters. This is why. This is why we did all this stuff. This is why we're doing it now. So I'm not going to make this one super long because I do want to. There's another one I want to do today, and usually I would kind of combine them, but I'm going to kind of split them out. Because they're not quite related. All right, I think that's all I got. It's just important to remember that, the butterfly effect is frequency-based. It's not event-based. And if I didn't clarify that in the beginning, I do want to come back and kind of loop around to it. Our frequency shifts the reality. The decision, not so important. The why we made the decision, that's what matters. The energetics behind the decision, that's what mattered. The linchpin in that reality. I did a video a long time ago about, can't remember what they were even called. It was a term actually they used in one of the Marvel shows. I think it was an anchor being is what they said. And they kind of anchored that reality. There'll be a lot of people in your life that might anchor down a certain reality. You see it a lot with blood family kind of stuff. With one member of the family will die, somebody usually in the older generation will die. All of a sudden the family kind of splits apart. That was what held those realities together. As soon as they're gone, everyone kind of goes their separate ways. They anchored in that reality, and once they're gone, there's not enough to anchor it in. There's not enough of the relationship left, and everyone kind of goes off and does their own thing. You're going to have anchor beings in your reality. You're not going to be the anchor being in every reality you participate in. You might leave realities and the anchor being is still there, and other people might still participate in it, but you decide to leave. So in a way, you're always, let me rephrase it, you're always going to be the anchor being in realities you participate in, but it can go on without you. Sometimes it'll keep going. A lot of realities I left, it's still going on. The people that were kind of the ringmasters in there, they're still doing it. I just chose not to participate in them anymore because my frequency had outgrown them and I couldn't participate. It was now holding me back instead of pushing me forward. And we need to be able to kind of understand what's holding me back and what's pushing me forward, because what used to push me forward, all of a sudden it's starting to hold you back. And it's the same choice, but the energy of why you're making it is now a different choice. I used to go to a place every Friday for a year because I was supposed to connect with certain people there, and I knew that. I didn't know exactly who. Some I knew who, some I did not know. I just knew I had to be there every Friday at a certain place at a certain time to see certain people, and I knew that. But got to a point where I didn't have to do that anymore. I'd paid back that karmic debt. I'd gotten that reality. I'd gone as far with it as I could go for my activation purposes, and the people who were with me in that reality had gone as far as they were going to go, with where they were willing to go with their awakening or ascension process at that point. There's nothing else I could do. Now I'm treading water in this reality. There's no point in me being here anymore. I'm just holding myself back. So what used to push me forward, now it's pushing me, it's holding me back, and you can feel it. And a lot of times you can feel people trying to push you out of the nest because these people have contracts with you to let you go. It's time to go. You don't need to be here anymore. We're fine. You go on. But a lot of times, sometimes it's not as nice as that. Because the reality's done. And there are other times, I always tell this story. I don't know I can't remember who it was. I can't remember where I read it. But it was about this woman. I think it was a woman. It could have been a man. It doesn't really matter. That burned down her fiance's house on purpose because she was angry with him, and they stayed together. And I just could remember reading that and thinking, boy, I used to really sweat over any little thing I did if it would break up a relationship or break up a friendship. And this person literally burned down someone's house and they stayed together because the reality was not complete. They were still trying to get something out of it. And it didn't matter what the act was because the contract was not complete yet. In the terms of whatever they were trying to do, they had not reached that point where that contract was fulfilled and each one was ready to leave. The act did not matter. It's the energy that kept them together. But whatever it was for them, it doesn't matter. And if that does not show you the act does not matter, nothing will. All right. Keep practicing the art of intuition.